Okay, today we were looking at the call to freedom, and it's really the subject I should have talked about last week, but it was, whenever something comes up that I would rather talk about, I will usually do that, even though we have a holiday. I don't really like to be tied into holidays, and we can, as I point out, a holiday is really the acknowledgement of some spiritual principle that we are observing all the time. And so it's a marked day on the calendar, but it's not a marked day in our consciousness. It's a principle that is at work all the time. So it doesn't matter when you talk about freedom, when you talk about any of the things that we talk about during holidays, the principles involved are what's important, and that's what I like to think of as the holiday, is a remembrance of what that principle is, so that I can apply it to whatever's going on in my life now, so I can remember to apply it in whatever's going on. So when we talk about freedom, of course, we think about our country, but we also, from a spiritual point of view, we want to understand what it means to be free on an internal level. Independence Day is a time when we celebrate our freedom as a nation and as individuals. Although everyone faces the occasional restrictive condition, and life in the land of the free is not without its challenges, it isn't difficult to find many blessings to count living in a country like ours. And of course, I can make a long list of things that I'm grateful for. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, the idea of counting your blessings. It's a good habit to get into, but it's also important to recognize that you can live in a country like the United States that is about the freest country in the world, probably, still. And you can be tied up in all kinds of things. You can be under bondage to all kinds of things that are going on. Jesus talked about this at one point. He just said that you'll know the truth, and the truth will make you free. And the response was, well, we're free already. And he pointed out that if you sin, you're a slave to sin. And what is sin? We look at it as the idea of falling short of our divine potential. Has anyone sinned this weekend or this week? You don't? Raise your hands. We've all fallen short of our divine potential. It's very easy to do because we think so much of ourselves as a physical being. As yes, we are a soul, but we occupy a body, and the body sometimes presents us with problems, and we become enslaved sometimes to that. And it's important that we know the difference, but you don't have to have anything particularly wrong with in the physical sense, because there are a lot of people that have more money than you can imagine. And we all think if we had that much money, however much that is, we would all be happy. And how could they possibly be living enslaved to some fear? But we find that some of the wealthiest places in the country are the most drug addicted, and the most alcohol addicted, and the most shrink addicted. It's you got to make money to pay your shrink, So, but there's an undercurrent of problems that can happen in the freest country in the world, and it can happen to any one of us. You can have a situation going on in your life at any time where you feel you're in bondage to that situation, and your reaction is a very negative one. So that's what we want to look at. That's actually what we look at every week in some way, some form or another. This idea of the connection between how we're thinking and feeling and what's going on in our life. Are we obligated to have the thoughts and feelings that we have because the situation dictates it, because it tells us that we have to? And I think that's what Jesus meant when he said, if you sin, you're a slave to sin. If you fall short of your divine potential. And when do we fall short of our divine potential? Anytime we think we are just a human being, subject to whatever appearance is has showed up in our life at this time. And we have a negative reaction to that, and we go into some type of a situation where we're in bondage to our own thoughts and emotions. And so we're a slave to that kind of sin. We're a slave to the falling short of our divine potential. And of course, we all do it, and it's so easy to do because we're so trained to do it. It's a knee-jerk reaction, almost. And so we come to a place like this, and we find out there are other ways to approach a situation, approach a problem. You don't have to solve a problem to be at peace about it. That's one of the things that we want to understand. Because if you think you have to solve the problem to be at peace, then you make it conditional. You make peace conditional. And I think, again, when Jesus said, I give my peace that passes all understanding, this is kind of the type of peace he's talking about. It doesn't make sense on one level. If I have a problem, I should be worried. I'm obligated, basically, to worry. And nobody's standing there with their arms crossed looking at me saying, you ought to be worried. Although people do. If you have a situation going on in your life and you act like everything's just fine and one of your family members comes in and says, you're not worried? It's like, you're obligated to worry. You've got to worry. If you're not worried, it means you don't care. You're not really aware of what's going on. Let me explain how bad this is. And I'll go on and do that for you. But we often get help, in other words, for our state of mind. If it's not living up to the condition that we have, then we're somehow coaxed into remembering how worried we should be. The greatest oppression most of us face is the tyranny of our own thinking. Answering the call to freedom involves an examination of the internal dialogue that occupies our mind. And the reason that's difficult to do is because it's running all the time. And it's running, we think, in a justified manner. We're constantly reflecting what's going on in our external life. And we're assessing that, and we're deciding whether or not we should worry, whether or not we should fear, and all of the kinds of reactions that we have. We've all probably had the experience where the situation said you should be worried, but you were able to not buy into that. You were able to see that from a higher perspective. And a couple of weeks ago, Bev asked about why do we pray? What's the purpose of prayer? It's a conscious grabbing hold of that mindset that's going on. When you're praying about something and you're doing it properly, you're doing it in a positive kind of way, not like Eric Butterworth said, where you worry with your eyes closed. We are mindful of our thinking, of what's going on in our thinking and feeling, and we're saying, I don't think I'm going to do that. I'm not going to have that kind of reaction. And that's really what prayer does. If you have a formal time of prayer, hopefully you sit down and release the negative reaction you're having and open yourself to this or something better, a greater possibility. So I don't think we'll ever eliminate the need for formal prayer. For times when we set aside this, I'm going to be aware of God active in my life right now. And we may carry that idea that, yeah, of course, God is within me, God is everywhere present. There's no place I can be where God is not. But sometimes we can have that dialogue running through our minds while we're worried about the thing that is at hand. And so prayer would interrupt that. That would be the value of it. It would be to interrupt that kind of unknowing tape that's playing at that moment. So it's that inner dialogue that is can be the tyranny of our own thinking. And I don't know who came up with that particular statement. I've heard it someplace, but it's appropriate. Jesus named worry about the future and fear of lack as two of the most debilitating conditions. He talked about that in the Sermon on the Mount when he said, why do you worry about what you will wear? Why do you worry about what you'll eat and all of that? And that tells me he was talking to the peasant class, because the wealthier people don't worry about, am I going to have any food today? They worry about what kind of food we're going to have. You know, if you have enough, it's like, what do I make for dinner? I'm tired of everything I've been cooking. And, you know, the problem is not eating. It's what you are going to eat or what you're going to wear. So I think he was talking to the peasant class, and that's a very important idea to me. He was talking to people who are on the margin of just surviving life, and he was saying, here's something that can help you. Why do you worry about these things? Because the Father knows you have need of them even before you ask. That's a mindset that probably did not occur to many people and doesn't occur to most of us. That if you're worried, it's because you have forgotten that there is a process of unfolding that is occurring in your life right now, and the answer that you seek is coming forth. And if you can get into that mindset, then you won't be, the tyranny of your mind won't be driving you crazy. But again, Jesus named worry about the future and the fear of lack as two of the most debilitating conditions. The remedy he offered was the assurance that the Father knows our needs even before we ask. And what does this mean? There's a story of a little girl. I guess she wasn't so little, but she was a warrior. Okay, this girl was apparently a warrior. I think this is a mythological story. But she was being trained to be a warrior, and her instructor said, it's time for you to confront fear. And we're going to set up a time where you actually do that. And the girl was not looking forward to it because she didn't know how to confront fear. And so the day came where she showed up for battle, fear was there. And she asked fear, how do I defeat you? And fear said, I really have no power over you unless you do what I say. And as long as you do what I say, I have power over you, and I will win every battle. So the moral of the story is, don't do what your fear is telling you. And what does your fear tell you to do? And how do you lose the battle? You fear. You become afraid. You start projecting down a certain line of thought that is self-destructive. So you lose the battle. To confront fear is to say, no, I'm not going to have that reaction that this condition is saying I should have. It's being aware of what's going on. And I think that a story like that's good to just kind of peg that in our thought. Just next time you feel afraid, treat your fear like it's a thing, like it's a person, like it's an adversary. How do I overcome you? And fear will say, as long as you do what I say, as long as you react like I say you should react, I will always win. Very simple idea. It's so simple I almost thought, surely I can come up with something more profound than that, but I thought it was pretty good when I thought about it. Because it is that simple. If you're in a situation now where you're reacting in fear or worry, treat that as something you can set outside of yourself and you can talk to and say, how do I defeat you? How do I stop worrying? How do I stop being afraid? And your fear will respond as long as you do what I say. And I'm telling you to be fearful, to be worried. As long as you do what I say, you're going to lose. You'll never overcome me. But when you stop doing what I say, you will win. You'll win the battle, and I will be powerless against you. And that's just the idea of changing your mind. And we think we don't have that option when we're confronted with something. And I have talked to so many people that have been in conditions that are beyond my understanding in terms of, they've been involved in things I can't even imagine another human being having to go through. And one person in particular explained to me that their life looked so black and so bleak at one point that they were going to kill themselves. But something in them said, no, don't do that. That's not going to solve the problem. What's going to solve the problem is for you to stand firm where you are in the midst of this problem. Stand there until you are strong, until you find your center of power, till you find your center of strength. I have been in that situation myself a number of times where my world was crumbling to the point where it looked like it was not retrievable. And every day I would shrink in fear thinking about this situation. And one day I stopped doing that. It's like I backed up to the wall, I hit the wall, I couldn't go any further back, and I said, that's as far as I'm going to go. And something in me came alive, and it said, I don't care what happens, I'll be okay. So I found my center of power, and I know that it's possible. I have not been in a situation where somebody was holding a gun to my head or some major life-threatening thing was happening. I've had a few of those, but not too many. But where most of the problems we have in our life are not that extreme. It's those little things that gnaw away at us all the time. But I know that it's possible because I've done that. I backed up to the wall as far as I can go and said, that's as far as I'm going. I'm going to get through this. Even if I'm destroyed, I'll be okay. And that's true. You know, we are immortal beings. That's one of the things I find very helpful with this, the study of near death, is we discover through countless stories people tell us that when they have the worst experience imaginable, that is, they're killed, they're still alive. They're still who they are. And oftentimes they'll look at the car wreck they were just in, they'll be above the thing looking down, they'll see their body, they'll scarcely recognize as them. They'll see people running to the crash, all freaked out, and they'll wonder why they're so worried. They'll wonder, they'll be saying to people, I'm okay. They put two and two together, they realize that that body and that car is theirs, that they're going to be okay, or that they are okay, and they're trying to tell people this, but they don't have a body. If you don't have a body, you can't talk. You can't talk to people. That's one of the advantages of having one. The advantage of that kind of thinking is we're not a body, and in fact, all of the problems that we have are body related. And if we can get to the point in ourselves where we can grasp that idea, that's a good place to begin. I'm not this body that's being attacked. I'm not this body that's being challenged. I'm something more. So Jesus was saying that we need not live in constant worry and fear about the future or our material needs. We should focus instead on living each day, surrendering our worries and fears to the understanding that a greater good is now unfolding through every aspect of our experience. Many of us think of surrender as defeat. That's how it's used in a lot of contexts. But those of you that are involved in recovery programs understand it means something different. It means letting go and releasing to a power greater than ourselves. And I like to think of that power greater than ourselves as my soul, my true self, that's always with me. If I'm reacting in fear, I've dropped out of that soul dimension, and I'm seeing myself as something that can be harmed, something that can be hurt. The soul cannot be harmed, cannot be hurt in any way whatsoever. But my ego can, or there's a part of me that can be hurt, and I'm reacting to that. surrender is letting go and being empowered. It's letting go of the old perspective. This thing that I am can be harmed. It's releasing that idea and saying that a power greater than that is present, is now dealing with this situation. So it's a very positive thing. Surrender is a very positive and very powerful thing. I love the word surrender. And a lot of times I'll use it in my time of quiet, in my meditations. I just surrender to this presence. Have you ever closed your eyes to meditate and your mind just goes crazy? If you try that, just say, I surrender. Because what is that internal dialogue, that chatter that's going on? If you surrender, you will let go of that. It's like I can't control that, so I surrender. Something greater than me, something greater than my ability to control my thinking is present. And it's just a way to let go. It's like ice melting. It's something hard that becomes something very soft in a very natural, easy way. So that I have found to be helpful, the word surrender. I surrender, thinking of this greater power. Because the soul is always kind of standing in the background, looking at us, kind of smiling as we are thinking about all these million things going on, trying to resolve the world's problems. It's kind of standing back there saying, you know, your problems are not near as big as you think. There's a lot more to you than you think. You're living in a very small part of yourself at this moment, which is why you're having this reaction. And of course, the soul never goes into that part of us, so it just stands back and smiles. But if you say, okay, if you're such a hotshot soul, I surrender to you. I let go and let you take over the situation. It's a very healing process, a very healing practice to do. And you'll be amazed how your mind will come down to an even keel. And you won't be struggling with trying to stop the thinking. You're surrendering to something that knows how to do it. The frantic thinking subsides the larger your vision gets. It's like if you're climbing a mountain, you have a certain vision. The higher you go, the further you see. The more we surrender, the more we relax, the better we see. And the more we know, I've been here before, still here. I'll get through this somehow. The answer will come. It always does, and it always will. The freedom you experience in your morning quiet may evaporate in a cascade of worry by afternoon. Inner freedom requires presence of mind, a kind of mental and emotional, situational awareness. It's just being aware. And I'm not associating mindfulness with the movement of mindfulness. You pointed that out to me several years ago. It's very good practices and stuff. I watched many of the speakers that represent that organization. I would recommend it, actually. But let's make mindfulness our thing, not part of a movement. Just like unity, don't make it part of a movement, make it yours. That's what we want to do. Mindfulness is being aware of what's going on in your mind at this moment and doing something about it. It's that simple. You don't have to watch hours of talks, although that may help. But that's all it is. Be mindful of what is going on in your mind at this moment and your emotions, your mental and emotional capacity, because that's what's creating what you're calling reality. And if you don't like your reality, there is something you can do about it. That's let it go. And the way to let it go is to be mindful that you're doing it, that you're making this projection, and stop doing it. Stop giving fear what it wants. As long as you stop doing what it says, it'll leave you alone. And the only way you can do that is to become what? Mindful. Very simple. You can go to church every week, and I hope you do. You can pray every day, I hope you do. You can read your Bible. I don't really care if you do. You can do whatever you want, but until you become mindful, nothing's going to really help. Because it is what is going on in us at any given time, that's what's creating that reality for us at that moment. Can any of you get out of this moment? We all try it. We're all experts at trying. Has anybody succeeded? I will ask for hands on that one, because if I see a hand go up, I'll have you come up here. We are trying to get out of this now moment all the time. We're not mindful. We're mindful of what we think is going to happen or what has happened. To be mindful is to actually, can you feel the air conditioning right now? Can you see the light? Can you hear this wonderful minister speak? Are you here now? You know, that's the big question. And if not, where are you? Do you want to share that? We can all be somewhere else real easy, real fast. I'm always real mindful at the dentist's office. I'm usually thinking just a few minutes ahead, you know, in the waiting room, how that's going to feel. But when you are involved in a stressful situation, you tend to bring your awareness into the moment. That's what's kind of interesting about it. I shared the story when we were learning how to sail. The biggest fear I had in sailing was wind, which makes absolutely no sense, because that's how you get around. But the more I learned to deal with the wind, the less afraid I became, and actually would hope the wind would get stronger. But what would happen is the higher the wind gets, the more you're in the now moment. And that's one of the therapeutic things about any sport that brings you into the now moment. Or any practice. If you are a painter, you know, they say that happens there. A musician, same thing. When you're creating something, you come into the now moment. And that's interesting because you're creating in the now moment, because you're not scattering all of your energy somewhere else. Okay. Jesus talked about the foolish virgins who missed the wedding feast because they had no oil in their lamps. This is us, unprepared for the unanticipated challenge, triggering a flare-up of negative thought and emotion. We all succumb to negative surprises. But like the 10 wise virgins, our oil of mindfulness keeps us prepared. The moment we start our negative response, we catch it. We say no to it. So that parable, I'm not going to go into that now. It's too late in this talk. But the idea that these virgins were not prepared for the wedding feast, it's just saying, what is your oil? You know, what is it that will keep your life lit? And that's the oil of mindfulness. And so we're not prepared, something pops up, we lose it, and we're gone. And we have a very negative experience. We might attempt to achieve a state where we never worry or fear again. This is not realistic. The only time we can deal with the tyranny of our thinking is at this moment. Both the call to freedom and our answer to this call occur simultaneously. Freedom never stops calling, and we never stop answering. The key is to be aware of how we are responding to this call. And I think we all ought to have a clock like this, where time is irrelevant, it's just the now. And so, what am I thinking now? How am I using my faculties of mind right now? And this is our call to freedom. Thank you for watching this week's program. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with others. We want to reach as many people as we can, and we appreciate your help. We have many subjects in our video lineup, so feel free to take a look. If there's a topic you don't see and would like me to address, just put it in the comment section. I'd love to know what's on your mind. To subscribe to this channel, simply click our logo. Thanks again for your interest in independent unity, and have a wonderful week.